Do you really think history's greatest deception will arrive with a recognizable face, easy to unmask? No. What I'm about to reveal to you could change everything you think you know. Very few dare talk about it. And yet something is already at work in silence, transforming souls from within without almost anyone noticing. It is not a future idea. It has already begun. But let me tell you one thing clearly. You still have time. In this video, you will discover something simple, concrete, and fundamental that you must do to prevent you and the people you love from being involved. That is why I asked you to stay with me until the end. And if you want to support the channel, leave a comment saying where you're listening from and subscribe. Now, let us begin. My name is Lorenzo. I am 49 years old, and until recently, I was convinced I knew everything there is to know about survival. 30 years of service in the Marines teach you to read danger before it arrives, to react under pressure, not to lose your head when the world collapses around you. I thought I was ready for anything. I was not ready for this. During a training operation in a remote area, a mechanical accident hit me head on. I will not go into details because that is not what matters. What matters is that my heart stopped for almost 20 minutes. According to what the doctors told me, I was no longer here, but I was not anywhere else in the sense they mean. The first thing I perceived was the light, not the blinding flat light you expect, like the one from the movies, the one that makes you squint. It was something completely different, a luminosity that seemed to come from every direction and from nowhere at the same time, as if space itself were made of brightness. The colors I saw had no name. I am not exaggerating. They were shades that do not exist in this physical world. Tones that communicated with something directly inside of you, as if each color were also an emotion, also a thought, also a truth. The ground beneath my feet was solid, yet it seemed to emit its own light, like walking on something alive. The air vibrated, not in an annoying way, but with a frequency you instinctively recognize, like the rhythm of your breath when you are at complete peace. In the distance, mountains pulsed with inner light, a light that was not just visual but seemed to communicate awareness. A river with water so transparent it looked like liquid diamonds. And then him. I recognized him even before seeing him clearly. His presence arrived before his figure, like a gravitational field passing through you. I have served under some of the most authoritative men in existence, generals, commanders, who silenced a room with a single glance. Beside him, they looked like children playing soldiers. Yet in his eyes, there was no distance. There was a compassion so deep and visceral that something inside of me, something I had kept locked away for decades, cracked instantly. Lorenzo, he said. My name in his voice contained everything, every choice I had made, every moment I had been afraid and hadn't shown it, every sleepless night after missions, every misplaced prideful thought, every time I had chosen duty instead of love, everything, every single thing. And there was no judgment in that voice, only a complete and absolute knowledge. It's not your time yet, he continued, but since you are here, there is something you must see, something the people you love will need to know. I wanted to speak, I wanted to ask questions, but words seemed too crude for that place. He made a gesture, and the reality around us transformed. We found ourselves suspended above Earth. Not the Earth seen from space, not the photo that comes to your mind that you know. The Earth seen with eyes that also see what is invisible. Spiritual currents flowing between continents like underground rivers. Shadow areas where something had gone deeply wrong. And a network of light, thin but resilient, connecting people scattered in every corner of the world. Look carefully. Jesus said. What is coming does not look like what people expect. The mark that was written about will not arrive with the face of evil. It will arrive with the face of salvation. The vision moved closer to the cities. I saw lines of people in front of structures that looked like hospitals. But in the atmosphere, there was something artificial, a manufactured despair. Screens everywhere broadcasting news of global health crisis, something that made previous pandemics look like minor episodes. The solution was presented as a triumph of human intelligence, a small biotechnological implant capable of monitoring health in real time, preventing disease, eliminating the need for traditional treatments. Political leaders praised it. Scientists called it the greatest breakthrough in history. Even some religious leaders blessed it publicly, calling it a gift from God. But then Jesus showed me what was happening beneath the surface. Each implant contained nanotechnology that went far beyond health monitoring. Once activated, it began to slowly redesign neural pathways, altering in an imperceivable way how people processed spiritual truth. It did not erase memories. It did not change personalities overnight. The transformation was gradual, surgical in its precision. I watched people who had been passionate believers progressively become indifferent to prayer. Their Bibles gathered dust. Mass became an obligation, not a source of life. They still called themselves Christians, preserved their theological positions, but something essential had disappeared. The thread connecting their soul to heaven had been severed with the same cleanliness of a surgical incision. This is what breaks my heart, Jesus said, and in his voice I heard something I did not expect, a real, authentic, agonizing pain. They will not realize what they have lost until it is too late. The mark does not present itself as such. It presents itself as wisdom, as responsibility, as love for one's family. The vision shifted and showed me scenes repeating in different ways all over the world. A single woman with 2 children in a small town in the American Midwest. She had to choose between paying for electricity and buying food, not both. I saw her kneel in the kitchen, crying in silence, asking for help in a low voice. And then, in a sequence of coincidences that were not coincidences, her nearly empty pantry filled up. A neighbor arrived with an extra grocery bag. A colleague remembered a loan forgotten for months. A parish called for a distribution of unused supplies. This is how I am preparing them, Jesus said. Every financial crisis, every impossible situation, every moment when human logic finds no solution, I am training their faith for the greater trials to come. Then I saw a man in his 50s, a former corporate executive in Seattle, who had lost his job at the moment when the mandate for the implants became required by every employer. His wife pleaded with him every night to give in for the sake of the children, so as not to lose the house. The children did not understand why their father was making things difficult for himself over such a simple medical procedure. But that man felt something he could not explain with theology or logic, a certainty that transcended any rational argument. Accepting that implant would mean losing something infinitely more precious than a house. Do you see his struggle? Jesus asked. I'm not looking for people who understand every prophetic detail. I'm looking for those who know my voice so intimately that they recognize the deception even when they cannot explain why. The man chose to resist. He lost the house. His wife left, taking the children. He ended up sleeping in his car, working under the table, eating at soup kitchens. But when I looked at him, with the spiritual eyes that vision had given me, he was surrounded by light that seemed to come from within him. angels stationed around his battered car. His prayers carried a weight and an authority that moved heaven. I struggle to understand, how could that be a success in the eyes of God? You are still thinking like someone who has something to lose, Jesus said, without harshness, but with absolute clarity. What is coming will separate those who are willing to lose everything from those who are still trying to negotiate what to keep. He then showed me the real battle, not the one people expect, with angels and demons facing each other in stormy skies. Something much more subtle and much more terrifying. In the boardrooms of large corporations, behind the chairs of executives, there were figures I could only describe as shadows endowed with intention. They did not force anyone's hand. They did not violate freedom. They merely amplified what was already there. The natural ambition of an entrepreneur became devouring greed. A politician's desire for order became tyrannical obsession. A scientist's curiosity became moral blindness. This is how the enemy has always operated, Jesus explained. He takes what I created as good and twists it just enough for his purposes. Technology in itself is not evil, but when humanity places its ultimate trust in its own creation instead of in me, those tools become weapons against souls. Then he showed me the churches, the same principle, pastors with the same shadows behind them, not controlling their words, but amplifying their fears. The fear of appearing irrelevant, the fear of losing members, the fear of economic instability. Perfectly human and understandable anxieties turned into the mechanisms through which compromise entered. I watched a pastor struggling with the decision to preach against the implants. His heart knew the truth, but the shadows amplified every doubt. What if you are wrong? What if you cause unnecessary panic? What if families leave and the church closes? The enemy does not need to plant new thoughts, Jesus said. He only needs to amplify the ones already present until they suffocate my voice. But then he showed me something that filled me with a fierce hope. Faithful believers also had supernatural figures beside them, but different ones. Angels who did not amplify weakness or desires, but whispered truth directly into the spirit of those who had learned to listen. You are not alone. He has been faithful before. This temporary suffering is building something eternal. Remember to whom you belong. Jesus then turned his attention to me with an intensity that seemed to fill every corner of that luminous existence. The true battle is not about technology or government control. Those are just tools. The real battle has always been and will always be a matter of worship. Whom will you truly trust when everything else collapses? He showed me the moment of choice that thousands of people would face. Apparently simple: accept the implant and continue your life, or refuse and face the immediate consequences. But in the spiritual realm, every decision carried cosmic weight. When someone held out their hand to receive the mark, I watched their guardian angel step back, the pain visible even in that figure of light. The individual felt nothing different in the immediate aftermath. No dramatic change, but the connection between their soul and heaven became thinner, like a rope fraying one thread at a time. Those who refused, however, experienced something extraordinary. At the very moment they said no, despite every logical reason to give in, their angel drew closer. The bond with the divine realm visibly strengthened. And then something happened that took my breath away. Other angels appeared, not assigned to that person, but drawn by their act of faithfulness. This is why I tell you not to fear, Jesus said. Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Every sacrifice made in faithfulness draws more resources of heaven toward that person. He finally showed me his strategy, the one he was preparing in thousands of lives scattered across every continent. Not shelters, not arsenals, not hidden supplies, something completely different. Small communities meeting in secret, sharing resources according to principles that defied all economic logic. A family's last jar of food feeding 20 people, a gas tank lasting 3 times longer than normal, clothes that did not wear out, children learning without schools. The miracles were silent, constant, irrefutable. Not spectacles, but daily providence, fueling an upward spiral of trust and blessing. But you must warn them, Jesus said with an urgency in his voice that I had not yet heard. The time to build these foundations is now, not when the crisis arrives. Spiritual muscles must be trained before the race begins. He showed me what the faithful were concretely doing in preparation. Periodic fasting to learn to depend on God instead of physical sustenance. Sacrificial giving to break the power of materialism. Prolonged prayer to sharpen the ability to hear His voice. Memorization of scripture to have the truth anchored in the mind when external sources disappeared. The man sleeping in his car in Seattle had been fasting every week for years. The girl from Texas knew entire books of the Bible by heart. The doctor who had lost his license had practiced the art of recognizing God's voice in small decisions for years before finding himself having to recognize it in the big ones. Preparation is not about food supplies, Jesus said. It is about building an unshakable trust in my character and my providence. Then the vision began to dissolve, but before it vanished completely, Jesus looked at me with a clarity and depth that I still feel right now. In this body that breathes and walks among ordinary people, as if those eyes continue to look at me through every moment of the day. Tell them that faith is not a blind trust in pleasant results. It is an absolute certainty in my character, regardless of circumstances. The faithful you saw were not spared from suffering. They were sustained through it. This is the promise I make. Not comfort, but presence. Not ease, but providence. Not safety, but purpose. I found myself in a hospital bed. A woman, my closest colleague, was holding my hand and crying. The doctors spoke of a miracle, running test after test, looking for answers in medical records and MRI scans. They were looking for medical explanations for something that was not medical. The mark does not arrive with a face of evil. It arrives with a face of the solution. It arrives with a reassuring voice of reasonableness, with statistics, with the endorsement of institutions. And the difference between those who recognize it and those who do not see it will not depend on the theological knowledge. It will depend on intimacy with a voice, on how long and how seriously someone has trained to listen to it. Prepare your spirit now, not when the crisis arrives, now while there is still time, while circumstances allow it. Learn to recognize God's voice in the small things, fasting, praying, giving, memorizing. They seem like difficult disciplines in normal times, but they will become life jackets when everything else collapses. What Lorenzo experienced is not a distant story. It is a mirror held straight up to each of us. And the mirror asks us an uncomfortable question. Are you truly ready inside for what is coming? The first piece of advice is simple but powerful. Start today to listen to that inner voice you keep silencing. It is there that God speaks, always. The second, train yourself to trust Him in small daily crises, because those who learn to do so now will not find themselves unprepared when the trials become greater. The third, stop walking alone. Authentic community made of real people looking into each other's eyes will be the most precious refuge you can build. And on this very point, I want to tell you something important. I am thinking about creating a private group, a place we can meet regularly, study prophecies together, analyze what is happening in the world with spiritual eyes, share personal experiences without judgment, pray together, support each other in difficult moments, and help each other grow in faith in a concrete and deep way. A place where the truth is spoken with clarity, with calmness, without fear, and without filters. Not just any group, but a community of people who have truly chosen to wake up. If you feel this is for you, if you feel these words belong to you, comment right now, salvation, and I will build it as soon as possible together with you.